What is up, Trailblazers? Welcome back to my channel. For today's guide, we're going to be covering Luka, the physical nihility 4-star limited unit. Now, I am a bit sorry that this video is kind of late and I guess kind of loses a bit of relevance because now everyone's already covered him, but I really want to stay consistent with the guide videos. I had to go to hospital on Saturday, so I didn't have time to do the video, and now somehow because of Fontaine coming out, it's Thursday, but whatever. In today's guide, we'll be doing kit, relics, light cons, and teams with key moments timestamped in the description below. Let's not waste any more time in the intro and get into it. So, for his kit, Luka's specialty is that he is a bleed damage dealer, and he has a lot of utility in that he can inflict vulnerability, he's a very strong physical toughness breaker, and he's a very skill point efficient character. Prior to Luka's introduction to the game, the only way that you could apply the bleed DoT was through breaking an enemy's toughness, which made it a little bit unreliable. This was a bit of a shame because bleed is a very strong DoT because it actually scales with the enemy's health, and so in future content when we start to see enemies with a much larger HP pool, then you'll really start to see the value of bleed come through. As it stands right now though, it is an extremely powerful DoT that can only get better. With that covered, let's talk about Luka's kit. Luka's skill, Lacerating Fist, will deal physical damage that scales with Luka's attack to an enemy with a 100% chance to cause the target to bleed. This is a normal DoT application of bleed and is separate to the break effect bleed that you can apply, meaning that you can have two bleeds running concurrently. As bleed does scale with the enemy's HP, there is a max damage ceiling of 24% of the enemy's max HP per bleed trigger. However, there is also a second damage ceiling that scales with Luka's attack up to about 338%. Now, it is worth stressing that, to be honest, with this normal DoT and the attack scaling, you are definitely not going to be doing 24% of an enemy's HP anytime soon. The damage ceiling is just there though to add these limitations, otherwise this skill could be extremely broken. Up next is Luka's talent. Now, Luka's talent is his fighting will stacking mechanic, and you can stack up to 4 stacks of fighting will. For the talent itself, Flying Sparks, after Luka uses his basic attack or skill, he will receive 1 stack of fighting will. When Luka has 2 or more stacks, he will enhance his basic attack, which will cause it to do 3 small hits of up to 20% of Luka's attack, followed by a bigger blow, doing 80% of Luka's max attack to an enemy target. Additionally though, after hitting a bleeding foe with Luka's enhanced basic attack, the bleed status that's already applied to them will immediately deal damage equal to up to 85% of its original damage at max to that target. This means that Luka can force proc bleed effects that an enemy has in a very similar way to how Kafka's skill works, but only for bleeds as opposed to all DoTs. Bleed is used plural because it will apply to both the break DoT bleed and the normal DoT application of bleed. Luka's ultimate coup de grace is a single target ultimate with a horrible 130 energy cost. It will give Luka 2 stacks of fighting will at level 10 with a 100% base chance to increase the enemy's damage received by 15% for 3 turns, and then it will also apply physical damage equal to 330% of Luka's attack after the debuff application. A 15% damage increase on a 4-star is a great ability and shouldn't be overlooked for Luka's overall supportive capabilities. Luka's technique Anticipator, he will attack the enemy and cause them to bleed. Soon after, he will gain 1 additional stack of fighting will. It's a very strong technique when used appropriately because it can be a good way to immediately apply bleed DoT to an enemy susceptible to it. For Luka's traces, his A2 Kinetic Overload, when using his skill, he will dispel 1 buff from the enemy target. It's very freaking valuable, you have no idea. It gives Luke some great slot efficiency to the level of something like Paler's Dispel. For his A4 cycle breaking, for every stack of fighting will obtained, Luka will regenerate 3 energy. It's a very nice trace because Luka isn't a skill spammer by trade, and his basic attack does have an energy regen value at base of 20, so this trace will massively help reduce the need to run something like an ER% rope. Finally, Luka's A6, Crushing Fighting Will, when using an enhanced basic attack, every attack direct punch deals a 50% fixed chance for Luka to use 1 additional attack. What this means is, in theory, that he has an extra 3 attacks with a max cap of 6 in total. Before doing a full kit summary, it is customary to do a run through of his Eidolons, especially because Luka is a 4-star character, so there's chances that you will have picked up more than 1 copy of him. On his E1, Fighting Endlessly, when attacking a bleeding enemy, Luka's damage dealt increases by 15% for 2 turns. His E2, The enemy is weak and I am strong, if his skill hits an enemy with a physical weakness, he will gain 1 stack of Fighting Will. Luka's E3 and his Eidolon 5 boost his skill talent and then his ultimate and basic attack respectively, and are your standard Eidolon 3 and 5. Luka's E4 speed determines the victor. For every stack of fighting will obtained, he will increase his attack by 5%, stacking up to 4 times. And then finally, Luka's Eidolons 6, a champion's applause. When an enhanced basic attack's Sky Shatter Fist hits a bleeding enemy target, every direct punch used by the enhanced basic attack will cause the target to take damage equal to 8% of any bleed DoTs currently applied to them. It's the only Eidolon that actually refers to his bleed, so it's a very interesting one, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need Luka's Eidolons 6 to make him valuable, as bleed is already pretty valuable as it stands. With the fundamentals covered, let's talk about Luka's kit in some kind of like conclusive thoughts. As established, Luka is a physical DPS, and his skill is the only way of applying bleed to an enemy without hitting a weakness break. As it stands right now, this makes him a great asset for dealing with high HP tanky enemies where Luka can get a lot of value out of the HP draining mechanic. As anticipated, there is a lot of conjecture about the overall best value of going down a break effect bleed route or a normal attack bleed route and relying on the skill's application. In overall raw bleed damage, a break DoT will be stronger than Luka's normal DoT on the number that you see on screen when the bleed triggers, mostly due to the relation of the attack percent cap to his skill. With that said, being physical in and of himself, having a pickup of a break effect stats isn't a waste on Luka on account of the fact that he could be the solo physical sub DPS on your team and be capable of inflicting bleed alongside his normal bleed when needed. With that said, there is safety in building him primarily for his attack scaling normal DoT as a priority, as this will eliminate some of the variability in each battle for things like enemies' toughness and whether or not they have even a weakness to physical weakness in general, as well as other characters competing with Luka for the break, such as if someone like a Sampo or an Aster takes the break off of him, then that means that they are going to then reduce his overall DPS output if you go into an overall break build. Now, I'm not going to suggest which route you should go down. Personally, if I had Luka, I would be going down just the skill-based normal attack one because it's more slot-friendly, because you can just leave him built as is. If you want to go into a bleed route, that is completely up to you. Like I say, the break bleed does do a lot more damage, but it's got too much variability and randomness for my liking. I will be covering off 2 different build options for him though anyway. As noted at the start, Luka has a ton of utility in his kit. Luka's ultimate brings a damage vulnerability debuff to the enemy, which can directly help your whole team. He utilizes bleed, which is a very strong DoT due to its enemy HP scaling mechanic, and additionally you have the fact that he can strip an enemy of a buff through his dispel on his skill, and his ability to self-sustain his skill point usage because of the fact that his skill point economy is worth using his basic attack. Overall, I'm quite shocked, but I do think Luka is a fantastic 4-star. I didn't expect to like him, but I do like him a lot. With his kit covered though, let's talk about these build options, talking about light cones and relics. Now for light cones, there is an element of, when you use Luka, there's the general theory that you'll be playing him with one other nihility or DoT character, and so this can naturally drive people towards playing him with his signature light cone, Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat. This is for a generic utility sense because when you play Luka with this light cone, he will be able to proc a defense decrease on the enemy for his light cone. When you pair this with his ultimate causing damage up to the enemy through the vulnerability debuff, then this gives a nice overall DPS increase for every other character in your team. This assumption does carry over, for example, if you were to be using Luka as a skill point neutral damage buffer for a carry like Blade or Arlen, where he's actually sitting as a sub DPS. As such, if you want to just build Luka for this route, then you can slot a copy of Resolution on him as a generic safe bet and forget about it, but you're not maximizing his overall personal DPS value, you're just using him to give him some good team-wide synergy. When thinking about Luka's overall DPS though, when playing Luka with Sampo and or Kafka, Luka can take advantage of the free Fermata light cone, as the first passive will help him to hit toughness breaks on the enemies quicker, and the second passive is not limited to the user who applies the shock or wind shear effect themselves. This light cone is available in the Forgotten Hall, and it's somewhat of lower value to reach for in my opinion though, because if you are playing him with Sampo and Kafka, you're probably going to want to put this light cone on them too if you are stuck for light cones right now. When thinking about Luka in isolation, he can pull a lot of value out of your typical damage dealing nihility cones, and so it's worth covering his other strong light cone options too. As such, both Sampo's signature light cone Eyes of the Prey and the 4-star nihility light cone Good Night and Sleep Well are great pickups for Luka's overall damage increase. When using these light cones, you are just equipping them for Luka to do the most amount of personal damage he can from a 4-star light cone's perspective. These light cones also reign true if you're already using a defense shredder on your team, someone like Pela or Well, in which case you might feel that Resolution Shines of Pearls of Sweat doesn't hold as much value, so it's completely up to you, but luckily Luka has this flexibility in 4-star light cones. For 5-star Lycones, pretty much all 3 options are great choices. I do like Welt's signature the most for him just because of the overall damage increase it brings to him. Kafka's signature will provide a nice damage increase along with a very valuable speed buff, and then Silverwolf's Incessant Rain, it will give effect hit rate and crit rate buffs which are somewhat of low value to Luka, but there is the option to give a 12% damage increase to the enemy on ultimate casted, much like Luka's ultimate. I'd argue that Silverwolf's is a very low priority option personally, but you are putting this on him for the base stats more than the effects. Ultimately, I wouldn't make Lycones too much of a headache. If you're really struggling for options, my go-to would be to recommend the Resolution as a priority, and then Fermata as your backup if you're struggling and play Luka with Sampo or Kafka. If you're playing him just for his own sub-DPS capabilities or main DPS capabilities, then just slot on Eyes of the Prey or Good Night and Sleep Well. Moving on to everyone's favourite topic when it comes to Luka, Relics. When we get to Relics, you have a proverbial fork in the road to go down, as you can opt for a Break Effect Luka, which will take advantage of max bleed damage on Break Effect when Luka is the breaker himself, or you can go for an attack-based Luka, who's looking at extracting the maximum amount of his normal bleeds that apply through his skill, and has less variability to worry about, such as the physical weakness of enemies, or Luka having to be the person that causes the break. Not to be lazy, but you should follow your hearts on this one. For me, example, like I say, I would just go for an all-rounder Luka, who you're just going to slot with anyone, and so I would just go for, attack up with speed. But if you want to go for Break Effect Luka because you want to tune Luka to be that maximum toughness breaker with all that big numbers, then you go for that route. Regardless of your choice in the fork, I'm going to send you down the path of a classic DoT build of a minimum effect hit rate of 67%, although it should be noted that the lowest ceiling for Luka is a minimum 40%, and then speed and attack percent being equal in value, with break effect substats becoming more valuable depending on your build. As everyone will tell you, building crit is a waste on Luka, don't do it, it will just take overall DPS value away from him, cool. Okay, so let's talk about main stats, and I'm going to recommend the following 2 sets, starting with a Break Effect Bleed Luka. His rope will be break effect percent, his sphere will be physical damage percent, his chest will be effect hit rate or attack percent, and then his feet will be speed or attack. For your skill-based Bleed Luka, you're going to want a rope of attack percent or energy regen percent, a sphere of physical damage, a chest of attack percent or effect hit rate if you really want it, and then a feat of speed or attack. Getting speed feet is becoming a bit of a nightmare for me personally because every character and their dog wants a pair, so if you only have attack and you want to move on relic farming, then it's not the end of the world, as someone like Asta can always foot the bill when you're struggling for speed. I think if you choose Break Effect Luka, then speed feet might become a tiny bit more of a necessity for the minimum of 134 threshold, so he's keeping up / is ahead of the rest of your team, and then you can hopefully align your breaks better, but I'll leave it up to you guys. For substats, there's the initial priority, like I say, of 40 to 67% effect hit rate as a minimum threshold, and then a goal speed of 134. After that, you'll be following the mentality that attack is the best on him, and then the close up next stats will be things like break effect, energy regen percent, and survivability, before you even ever think about looking at a crit stat, which is very low down in priority. For sets, I would recommend starting with Break Effect Luka. It's really simple. You will do the Thief of Shooting Meteor as the 4-piece with Talia Kingdom of Banditry on the 2-piece plain out ornament set. The goal here being to outright maximize the effectiveness of his break effect, short and simple. For normal attack Luka, the 4-piece Champion of Streetwise Boxing set, because it has an innate 10% physical damage bonus along with a stacking 5x5% attack buff in the 4-piece. If you don't want to farm Champion because it's with the Thief set and you've already picked up a decent set from the weekly bosses, then do feel free to utilize the 4-piece Musketeer of Wild Weed set on Luka too. After that, you'll be following the mentality that attack is. For your normal attack skill based Bleed Luka, he can actually pull a lot of value out of the 2-piece Champions and 2-piece Musketeer of Wild Weed set too. For plain our ornaments under this build, I would recommend either Space Sealing Station or Pan Galactic of Commercial Enterprise. With Space Sealing, you'll get a very achievable 24% attack buff, and as for Pan Galactic, I do think it has some value on Luka as it will help you hit your 67% effect hit rate goals easier at the small drop of some attack. I do say small drop though, as you'll need 96% effect hit rate for it to tie with Space Sealing Station on the max attack, and if you're going for that, which would be overkill, you'd be swapping your attack chest piece for an effect hit rate one anyway, which is a loss of attack. So personally, when you do put this on, you just have to accept that there's a bit of an attack percent drop, but it's fine. Feel free to offer some alternatives below, or let me know where you're going to stand, because like I say, there's so much debate over kind of which option is better, and quite frankly, it's splitting hairs. That's my honest opinion of it. Go whichever one you have the relics for, or if you're playing in with Kafka, I don't know, just put whatever set is easiest to build in, because building characters in this game is not fun. Like 6 relic pieces is just crazy. Anyway, let's move on and cover teams quickly. Now, I've touched on teams throughout the video very briefly because I keep talking about Kafka, but let's just give a quick minute to it. Now there is the obvious banner team that you're going to really enjoy, which is your standard DoT team being the Kafka, Luka, and then one other DoT character. The idea here is that you apply as much DoT as possible to overall contribute to Kafka's explosion of the DoT on an enemy. While risky, the DoT trinity of Sampo, Luka, and Kafka works by giving an elemental variance along with the DoT and damage increase effects of Sampo and Luka's ultimate, with all the teammates being able to reap the benefits of light cons like Resolution and Fermata. In building these teams, you're going to want to run a very consistent lifeline character like Gapard, and then dropping down to double DoT, you'll generally want to make the swap for support like Asta, Silverwolf, and Paler for speed and defense tuning the team, something which I have covered in another video. As noted though, Luka does have the ability to bring damage taken increase to the team through his ultimate, which is an external vulnerability modifier on damage percent that is extremely valuable. Because of this and his ability to manage his skill point consumption well, he does pair well either in a great utility sub DPS for characters like Arlen or Blade and other carries that already have a massive ton of self damage and attack in their own kit, where they can value from the external help that Luka will build, especially if he brings Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat. Additionally, under this same utility, Luka has seen some value in mono physical teams, where the obvious goal is to just burn down the enemy with a physical weakness. But what do you think, guys? I want to end the video because it's 16 minutes long. I hope this helped. It's Luka. He's cool. I like him. I wish I was pulling for Kafka. I actually didn't like him at first, but I do anyway. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it helped. Feel free to sub, the usual, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.